Good evening and thank you for joining. And I would ask that all devices be turned off and silenced. The meeting is public, held under the Planning Act and live streamed on the Township's YouTube page. Collection of personal information as a result of the public meeting is under the authority of the Planning Act to aid in decision-making of these matters. Speakers are requested to provide their name and address for recording in the minutes. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes and be made available to the public. Interested members of the public can email the clerk or the Development Services Department if they wish to be notified regarding a particular application. Tonight's meeting is to consider public meeting reports, including staff recommendations to approve, defer, or deny. The planner will present, followed by question and answers for committee members, followed by members of the public. This committee will then make a recommendation of the applications to approve, defer, or deny. Following committee's decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. If a specified person or public body have the ability to appeal the decision of the committee to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the specified person or public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make a written submission to the Township of Stone Mills, before the application is provisionally approved, the specified person or public body is not entitled to appeal this decision.
Thank you, Cindy. No, we have a recommendation that the committee waive section 8.2. I won't read it all. We'll move item 10 up to item 6. I need a motion from the committee to approve this. Moved by Bob. I have a second by Merrill. All those in favor? Carried. Now I'll ask for approval of the agenda. Bob, thank you. Dieter, second, thank you. All those in favor? Declarations or conflict of interest or general nature thereof, are there any? Let the record show there is none. Adoption of the minutes of September the 1st. Have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Marilyn. Seconded by Bob, thank you. Any errors, omissions, any discussion arising out of those minutes? All those in favor? Carried. I welcome everyone here to the meeting tonight. Looks as though we have some interest. I will ask anybody in the audience, if they want to speak, raise your hand. You will be recognized either by myself or a committee member, and you will be allowed to speak and ask questions. Onward to we have a presentation here this evening from Melrose Engineering. I guess it's John Pike. He's here to make a presentation. There's been some inquiries about the do's and don'ts and the whys and the wherefore of this. Hydro-G studies being done, so the floor is yours, John. Carry on.
Thank you for having me. I think it's been about a dozen years since I've been before this committee to speak on hydrogeologic studies, so I'm about due to be here. Thank you for inviting me back. And I think it was summer the last time I was here. It's much nicer coming in the fall on the drive up here. I put together a brief presentation. We had previously provided a longer presentation to the Ontario Association of Committees of Adjustment that won about an hour on hydro-G studies, and I think I tried to condense this down into a bit of a briefer presentation, hearing that there might be some questions that people wanted to get to, rather than just listen to me talk on and on. Thank you for the introduction. I'm John Pike. I'm a hydrogeologist with Melrose Engineering. I've been practicing in hydrogeology since 2006. I am the Township peer reviewer. I've been for a few years now, peer reviewing hydrogeologic studies on behalf of the planning department. I also do peer reviews for Greater Napanee and Frontenac County, and sometimes for the city of Kingston and various other municipalities on an ad hoc basis. Really, when it comes down to what you do is severance studies at Committee of Adjustment. The overarching documents that we tend to go back to are from the D series guidelines from the Ministry of the Environment. And there are two guidelines with respect to land development, the D54, which is for individual on-site sewage systems, and the D55, which is for private servicing developments with private wells. The D55 is not specific to severances because the D5 documents were originally developed for the Ministry of the Environment and how they would review plans of subdivision prior to that being downloaded onto the municipalities, I think probably sometime back in the Mike Harris era. So they are a bit older, but we still do reference them on individual studies, and I think across Ontario you'll see a variation on a theme, but generally they all follow the principles of the D5 series guidelines. If I can ask for the next slide, please. And what we're really looking for out of studies, and I think are of interest, is we're looking for a sustainable yield of water. We're looking for a sustainable quality, so a potable quality water in the raw water, not treated water. And we're looking to see if there's going to be interference or undue interference to either proposed neighbors. We're interested in proposed neighbors where there be more than one severance at a time, or in particular in plans of subdivision where 4 or 5, maybe 6 wells would be drilled to proceed through a development of maybe 20 houses. So we're looking for those 3 principles. I think in the first one, in the D5 series, we talk about a 6-hour pumping test is what the Ministry of the Environment outlined in their guidance document at a minimum. And they talk about 3.75 liters per minute per person in a house. So we think of, if it's a 3-bedroom house, we think of 4 people. And they want that demand for a minimum of 120 minutes. And then we think of 450 liters per day per person. So in a 3-bedroom house, we're looking at about 1,800 and what is that, 1,800 liters per day in a house. We find, in my experience, it's conservative because the Environment Canada studies on water demand across the country. If you Google, I think the number comes in at about 275 liters per day per person on average. And also on average, houses are not probably occupied. If you have 3 bedrooms, there's probably not 4 people in each house. So the system is designed to be conservative from a water demand estimate. Also, if you look at a 6-hour pumping test and they pump at the minimum, you require, I believe, in your notices of decision, a minimum of 13.7 liters per minute. That comes out to, give or take, close to 5,000 liters. So over that 6-hour test, they are pumping a multiple of the expected daily demand. So there are some conservative layers into the water quantity testing. I provided a figure. This is from a pumping test I did on a well in the city of Kingston, and the upper blue line is the test well, and you can see the vertical hatch lines are the start and the end of a 6-hour pump test. You can see the test was started at a rate of 18.9 liters, so it was higher than the minimum required. And then as you start pumping, you can see the water level in the well decline. It went down, about 7 meters over the duration of the test. And then the test ending at the 6-hour point and watching that water level recover. So we're looking not only can the well sustain the yield during the pumping test, but are we mining the aquifer? So that question of does the water level come back to the pre-pumping conditions? And then the green and the orange line here represent wells that might be adjacent or nearby that were monitored for interference monitoring. So you can see with the green line, there wasn't a significant change during the about 24 hours we had the logger in the well. The yellow or the orange line is indicative of somebody being home. So you can see at points maybe somebody washed their hands or flushed a toilet, and their pump has come on to fill their pressure tank, and you see a little bit of a drawdown and a recovery. So these are typical things that we would expect to see come in the reports that you require as a part of your committee work that we're looking for. Did they pump at the rate that is prescribed? Did they pump for the duration that is prescribed? Do we see the drawdown? Does it recover? Are we seeing interference? In this case, this pumping test was done during December, so we'd be also interested, probably, we would have looked at precipitation leading up to this test, whether we see an influence from that. In this case, we're probably not overly concerned about the well going dry. As you can see, the well was a little over 30 meters dry, so you've got a 100-foot deep well with water at about 7 meters, so there's still quite a bit of water outside of the natural variability. And then, so beyond yield, if I could get the next slide, please. Quality is of importance, and within the quality, there are the standard parameters that are outlined in the D55 guidance document from the Ministry of the Environment and standard packages that the laboratories run for us. They're compared to, on this table, we call it a chemical standard. It could also be called a health-based standard. Of importance with those is bacteria, that the raw water without chlorine in it is 0 for E. coli and less than 6 for total coliform, so 5 or less. Though in the Ontario Drinking Water Standards, it says total coliform should be 0. The Ontario Drinking Water Standards are based on treated water, so what you get out of a municipal system. And then the D5 guidance allows total coliforms up to that 5 level. So there's a bit of variability at looking at only the Ontario Drinking Water Standards compared with the D55 guidance document. Beyond that, there's a standard parameters that a lot of us would be familiar with, like hardness, turbidity, a variety of metals that we would see out here. Sulfide can be high in certain areas of stone mills. You can get into some areas where the water is not great in the township and other areas where water is good and adequate. In areas where we see agricultural use or where we get into dug wells, nitrates become a concern from agricultural impacts, or if you were to look at potentially infill in a hamlet where there might be older septic systems or smaller lots, you start to see nitrates, and nitrates are a health concern. They inhibit the uptake of oxygen in pregnant women and babies, so that is one that is tracked quite closely. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask as we go through this. I don't know, do I have, what's on my next slide here? And I think a lot of questions come up on dug versus drilled wells, and out here in the rural community, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the difference. With the drilled well, we get a lot more protection from near surface and surface contamination with the steel casing that is set often in this area down into bedrock. So you get a protection from those upper layers. Often the well, like in my figure, you have a much thicker saturated aquifer that you're intersecting. So you have maybe 10 meters of water in your well, as opposed to a dug well that are often in this area. We're not talking about large sand aquifers, so we're talking about capturing the water often at the soil bedrock interface or the upper weathered bedrock. And in particular, in a summer like this, a lot of dug wells are vulnerable to going dry. So when we're looking at dug versus drilled wells, in May, we went through one of the wettest periods that we'd experienced in quite a while. So if we were seeing a report, or I was reviewing a report on a dug well that came in May, we'd probably have the burden that they would need to meet to be satisfactory would be higher than, say, if somebody was coming in now or had put in a dug well and tested it at the end of August in this year. and still had a lot of water left. So seasonality does come into play on whether you're looking at a dug well or a drilled well. Also, we call them dug wells, but a lot of them are blasted. And often the blasting introduces nitrates if they're using, a fertilizer type explosive to blast the well. So we're also looking at that in dug wells. You will often see that it takes them a while to kind of pump out the nitrogen associated with a blasted well as opposed to one that's been hammered down into the rock. The one advantage of a dug well, if you have tapped into some good water, is that it does provide quite a nice large reservoir in the ground. You get as you can see, you've got your concrete casing, and then often you've got quite a nice large gravel pack around it if you can intersect the water table and not worry about it going dry in the summer. Certainly municipalities around here, there are areas where drilled wells you're not going to find water. If you go over into Tyendinaga Township, there are certainly areas over there where you'll see an abundance of dug wells because drilling a well there isn't, you can go down and it's dry in the limestone, and then you go below that and the water quality is very poor. There's areas of the city of Kingston, I'd say along Unity Road, you'll find areas where there's drilled wells and there's areas of dug wells. So even in our neck of the woods where I think people assume water is abundant and unlimited, there are areas where water can be quite limited locally, and even concession to concession. And I think that's really my hope here was to come and provide you an overview that there is a document and a guidance document that we do follow, and that's essentially standard industry practice across the province. And it assesses, we're looking for the sustainable yield of the well, that the water quality, the raw water quality is potable or suitable for drinking, and that we're also monitoring for interference to protect not the neighbors or future neighbors that might arise from the development. I'm happy to answer any questions because I understood there might be some.
My question would be, is there a difference between digging, drilling, blasting a single well as opposed to 20 at once? Would it be better to do one this year and one next year, and one 5 years down the road, or does it matter if all of them are done at the same time?
I don't think the drilling process itself is the concern, and I don't think it's uncommon. I've seen it there was a subdivision in Hartington that got conditional approval, and they came in, as one of their conditions, they had to put a well at each lot, and they came and did each well, and then essentially every other day did a pumping test. So I don't, if there's a condition that they have to be tested, I don't think the drilling itself is going to should not cause harm in our area. Most of our aquifers are unconfined. And installing them and then studying them, if they're required to be studied as a condition of approval, I think you could do them all in the same year. And I'd say it's not uncommon at plans of subdivision.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions, concerns? I'll get to you in a minute. Go ahead, Aaron.
Just framing my thoughts here. Thank you for your presentation. At the committee level, we see applicants come that are subject to a hydro-G study as part of their application or provisional approval. And as you've noted, there's areas in the township where there's abundant supply of water, there's areas where there's less water supply. So there's one area in particular that comes to mind where we've had residents and applicants over the last few years that have expressed we were subject to the hydro-G study. It showed that there was quantity, quality, and interference, or risk or mitigation of interference at the appropriate level for the standard, but yet no sufficient water supply is reported through applicants, right, to us. So can you help me understand how, when you complete the study and you simulate for the conditions throughout the seasons and all the factors you've outlined, how a snapshot on a single day can capture future supplies 12 months to a couple of years down the road?
Sure, and I think there's a couple of ways. Really the only property that changes that we're looking at is the variability in the height of the water table, where the water table is. I mean, the rock and all of the other matrix, that stays the same. And that is generally an influence of precipitation. And the shallow aquifer, so where dug wells are, is more susceptible to short-term precipitation trends, whereas drilled wells are more susceptible to their watersheds. They're part of much larger areas you're capturing from. So some drilled wells might be experiencing some stress this time of year, but they're far less susceptible to it. And I think that's why in the D series, and if we go back to my pumping test figure, one more, you'll see in the comparison of how the pumping test is conducted, the drawdown curve we see from the pumping test I did in the blue line, compared to the individual demand used in a house over a 24-hour period. The idea is to stress the well or over pump the well during the test to show us whether it can meet those higher demand usages. And also we're looking for them in the test to talk about seasonality. So if you were to, I think we'd be all more, a test that was done in August of 2025 compared to one that was done in May 2025, on the face of it, we would probably weigh, like, okay, if it can meet August 2025, we're probably more satisfied than one that meets May 2025. And so there is some weight given to that into the review process. And the applicants, and sometimes questions go back to them to ask them to prove that out more. But it's really just a fluctuation of the water table. So in the blue line here, and I used one outside of the municipality because I didn't want to put anybody's application on the spot, or one person's review be up for public debate over others. But even though this pumping test was done in December, I think at the end of I don't know what year it was, but we would assume through our fall precipitation season, that well still had 20 some odd meters of, over 20 meters of water available to it, 60 feet. And that is outside the expected natural variability of the water table in our area. And so I think those are the factors we're looking at, is do we think this is within the range of the natural variability of the water table? Also, some of the wells, you can see of the wells in that, the well we were testing was 31, 32 feet deep, compared to the neighboring wells, which were 27 and let's say 28 meters deep. So in the monitoring data, you'll see sometimes the wells that are being monitored are shallower than are currently being tested. And I think I've encountered that in older wells, where sometimes people drilled as far as they need to, and then you see in new developments where the wells are deeper. So sometimes the neighboring or the monitored wells, though they're all taking from underground, we can't see down into the ground. Some of them are shallower than what we're seeing in the newer wells. And it might have been I don't know why, whether we're talking about some of the wells around here go back to I think we pulled the water well records early 1900s. So I think there's a variety of factors that we consider. And certainly township staff are pretty good at bringing forward if the residents have expressed concerns about specific applications, and that's very helpful because we only hear from the developer's consultant and their report, and if there's other information, it certainly is considered when township staff have that available to them and are able to bring it forward. I'd also note, like, there's the overarching law that applies here would be the Ontario Water Resources Act, and the general principle that the lawyers tell me that apply is that one person's water supply cannot interfere with another person's water supply.
Okay? Yes, Dieter?
Yeah, good presentation, John. Thanks for coming. All this stuff is way beyond my pay grade, but thanks for enlightening us. I have a question about water quality. The D55 water quality test. We've been adding the requirement that this test be done on the wells for severances, and we talk about requiring remedial measures in case the parameters don't meet the requirements. In your experience in this area, are there wells that have done these tests which cannot be remediated? I'm thinking, I remember
Yes.
several years ago, we had a bunch of wells drilled on a site, and the water quality parameters that came back were just like a horror show. So I went and blasted and put in dug wells, because the drill wells just wouldn't shake it. But I know in this area, I mean, I don't live too far from here, one of the biggest problems is sulfur.
Yep.
So I remember in December when you draw your bath, your water's kind of black and it smells pretty fragrant. I think that stuff can probably be treated, so can be salt. But is there a combination of wells that you've experienced that just cannot be treated, that you just can't fix them?
So when we talk about treatability, I'd split it out into two. If it's a health-based standard, you're not allowed to treat. So if you have bacteria in your raw water, or you have nitrates in your raw water, or another health-based parameter, you're not allowed to treat. A municipality would, or a regulated drinking authority would be allowed to treat. We would recommend against approval to somebody who has bacteria or another parameter, because there's not a good suitable way for the municipality to control that, in our opinion. When we talk about treatability, we're talking about things like hardness, sulfur, other things that can be treated within the operational guidelines. If you go to you'll see some they're in there that are an aesthetic objective. So that's just people don't like drinking turbid water. And then there's operational guidelines. So what can be reasonably treated, and those are the operational guidelines are some that a municipal drinking water system you would have to treat to make it satisfactory. And then for hardness, there's an upper limit. Alkalinity, that's what you see, a 500. Above 500 in the D5 series, they said it was not readily treatable. I think technology has probably come a long way since this D5 series guideline came out in the early 90s. But I have encountered a well here in Stone Mills that it was so high for sulfur and other parameters that in the provincial law that governs wells, you are required to abandon it. So beyond these guidelines, the water wells are controlled by Regulation 903, and the concentration of certain parameters in that well required that it be abandoned. There is no way you can try and treat or deal with the water.
Okay, supplementary question on dug wells. Yeah, you can do pump tests on dug wells, but how do you measure that effect on other wells nearby? Like if a dug well wouldn't affect a drilled well next door, would it? Or would it? I don't. So how does that figure into this?
So that's a double. You're less likely to cause interference from a dug well to another dug well, because your radius of influence coming out from the well is that much less, because if you think of a dug well as 6 or 7 meters deep, and if you pump it down to the bottom, you get a drawdown cone, you're unlikely to dry up other wells. So they do monitor, but you're less, I would say less likely, unless they're quite close by, or some of these dug wells tap into the same limestone fracture. So if you're looking at side-by-side houses that have wells that are in the same fracture, certainly you may see an influence, or in slope terrain where maybe your dug well is downhill from the neighboring dug well and they're tapped into the same fracture. Sure, there are ways you could interfere with an adjoining dug well. I would say they're, in general, less susceptible to it. And I would say on severances, we find interference, less interference in general than when we see plans of subdivision or plans of condominium where people are proposing 10s and 20s of houses across a whole field rather than one new house or, you know, certain strip development.
Okay, as a corollary, I know we've had people come to the meetings and saying, you know, we've got a dug well, so my neighbor's he's getting a lot and he's going to drill a well. How does that affect my dug well? That's the other concern a lot of people have. So does a drilled well, say, you know, 15, 20 meters deep, is that going to affect a 10-meter deep dug well next door? Or is that?
I mean, I think the answer, it could, and it should be monitored, but generally those wells are cased down into the bedrock, and the dug wells are often trying to get that interface between the soil and the bedrock, or that upper weathered limestone that a drilled well is trying to put a steel grouted casing through. So there is some general level of protection between a dug and a shallow well, because a dug well is trying to block off those near surface waters and contaminants. But they should be monitored because they can be interconnected, and the drilled well could influence your dug well and could cause it to go dry.
So in a hydro-G, then in that case, you would monitor any nearby dug wells too?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
we wouldn't say that, I wouldn't suggest that we would say they should exclude dug wells and only monitor. If you're doing a hydro-G study on a drilled well, you shouldn't only monitor the drilled wells. If you're doing a hydro-G study, the same on the dug wells, they should still monitor and collect the data on nearby drilled wells. I think within reason, we're not looking for wells that are hundreds and hundreds of meters apart, but we are looking for the nearest adjoining wells. Say if you're severing off, you know, if you've got a 200-acre field out in the rural area and your nearest neighbor is 500 meters down the road, we're not necessarily asking for that to be monitored because it's well outside the radius of influence of the well. But if you've already have 2 severances and you're looking for the third adjoining severance, sure, we're looking for one or both of those neighbors to be monitored. Also in the studies, you'll see the provincial government puts all the water well records, they're on Google Earth. If you Google Ontario water well records, you can look in on the Google Earth map and you'll see all the little dots of where wells are. The older the wells, some of them were lot and concession, so you'll see like 400 feet from this fence line and stuff. So they're not exact locations. You can kind of piece it together if you know the area, but they'll give you a really good sense too of in the neighborhood over the last 100 years, are people on drilled wells, how many drilled wells went in and then were declared dry and abandoned, and then you'll see dug wells. So you can get there's a pretty good regional picture available on the ministry, through the Ministry of the Environment, that gives you a picture of where you're going before you even start your study. And I think that's, a lot of the consultants rely on that to determine whether they're telling a developer that they should consider a drilled well versus a dug well. Came through this in Napanee recently, a developer put in a series of dug wells, and then if you look at the regional picture, yeah, sure enough, half the wells are reported as dry. So, that makes sense, because a dug well is quite an expense. Maybe that was a bit of a rambling answer that ended somewhere we didn't start.
My last question, and I'm done, this is more for just information purposes. How long ago has it required that geographic coordinates be put on newly drilled wells or wells?
Oh, that's a good question, because they still allow they still allow imperial on the water well records. So
You mean 400 feet from the road and 200
if you
feet
look
from
at
the
the
property
water,
line?
if you look at a current water well record form, I believe it still says at the top metric or imperial.
Yeah.
So-
But geographic coordinates, latitude and longitude.
I don't know if
That's
it's
what I
been
mean, because
20 years.
Yeah, that's what I
20
mean. Most
years
of
or
the
more.
newer ones, you can pinpoint them very accurately.
They are required
From
to
the
be.
data, okay.
Yeah, Latin long or UTM coordinates be put on them, but I did hear from somebody that some of the old wells are plotted out in the St. Mary's River. When they inputted them into the ministry's database, they're transposed, and there's a series of drinking water wells out in the St. Mary's River.
You had a question, Marilyn?
My question is, we were talking about the different times of the year, and I was just wondering, do you use some kind of formula for that? How would you do that? If you did something now, like for instance, this one was done in December, you want one done September and May and whatever, do you have a formula that you use to compare what you might expect from those types of things during the year?
I don't think there's a specific formula, because it certainly is a bit variable. I think if the provincial government does have a series of water wells called the Provincial Groundwater Monitoring Network here, this is the Quinte watershed, I believe, and Quinte has wells and is a part of that Provincial Groundwater Monitoring Network. So that has come up on developments where there's been questions about seasonal variability, and the developments have gone back and compared with where they were on the hydrographs or on the water levels, and benchmarked themselves against that provincial monitoring network. I think there's actually some not too far from here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Tamworth, because we've benchmarked against the Tamworth wells before. Like some of these provincial government programs that were funded, the data's not necessarily kept up to date on the website, but Mark Boone at Quinte Conservation's always been good to share it and pull it as necessary to support it. So there's that, and then I think there is some level of professional judgment on when these studies are done. We prefer not to have them done during the wettest time of the year, but they can. The burden of proof, like if your well is going dry in May during your test, that is going to be a problem. And there may be a period where they do the test, and comments in another municipality came back where they had done their test in early June, and they had to come back in August and provide water levels to see if they compare. And they had to provide an opinion then on whether, between the time of their June work and the August monitoring, whether it had changed their interpretation.
Thank you.
Sir, you had a question. Would you stand and state your name, please?
Yeah, I had a question. It might have been answered a little bit already. So my name is Boyd Waits. My question was just regarding neighbouring wells, basically on the quantity related to the neighbouring wells and the interference, and how you choose, which neighbouring wells to monitor. Like, is it based on the geology, or is it based on just the distance away, or
Well, I think
what is chosen?
how I've done it, because I've reviewed the studies here, but I do them in places like Kingston. Generally, we're looking at the proximity. We want immediate neighbors, because there is a cone of depression that comes from pumping in an idealized world, right? There's a beautiful cone, and so proximity is important. Also the type of the well and the depth. is somewhat important.
Is there a way that you can sort of calculate, you know, this well should be monitored, you know, going to a new well building? Or,
I think generally we're looking for everything kind of in 100 to 200 meters.
so if you said 200 meters, that would be,
I'd say once we're getting above 250, you're for a non-commercial type use, we're getting, if you think of the porosity of rock at, you know, even a couple of percent, and you project that kind of over that
so
volume.
it's really the distance, it's not the geology, you know, if you're downhill or anything like that.
No, it's normally just the distance, and once you get past kind of that distance, you're just the volume of water you're withdrawing in the test. Unless you talk about things like golf courses where they might take a couple of million liters a day of water out of the ground. Those tests don't come through the municipality, they come through the Ministry of the Environment. The ministry then, we start to talk about a 24-hour pumping test or a 72-hour pumping test as the large.
I'm just thinking residential.
Yeah, so I'd say, yeah, in a residential, because we're talking, generally we're on a single well, we're talking about pumping about 5,000 liters, sometimes 6 or 7 if the well is quite productive. That if you project that at a couple of percent porosity over the rock, you're not going to get out far. So a couple of 100 meters is about.
Okay. And just to follow on, if it's multiple wells that are being drilled, would the test be over the multiple wells being drilled and the neighbouring wells? Or because obviously if you're drilling 6 wells as opposed to 1, you're probably going to draw more water.
So specifically on severances, my understanding is that on a severance, each lot has to stand on its own. So each lot has to do its own, its well has to pass on its own. I would suggest it depends on the layout of the development, because I'm curious about the nearest wells. So if by the nature of the development, let's say they're building 3 lots that are side by side that are, I don't know, 30-meter frontages. So each well is probably no more than about 40 or 50 meters apart. I want all of those wells monitored. On the other hand, if then the neighboring wells are 200 meters away, maybe they don't get monitored. But if you're adjoining, then that's of interest. So if we're, you know, if there are 3 lots in a row that are there, and now these are the next 3, then yes, consideration of neighbors should be there. And I would encourage neighbors to respond to the consultant and provide their information. I know some people are sometimes hesitant about participating in these studies and having somebody come and access their well. And certainly in older parts, older wells, some of them are buried or underneath houses, so maybe they aren't accessible. But I would encourage people to partake, because you will get that information hopefully back from the consultant if you ask, or see it show up in the study that goes to the municipality.
Okay, thank you.
And if people want to partake and are being told not to, I'm sure they could pass that along to Cindy as part of the peer review comments and process.
Anyone else have any questions? No? Well, thank you, John, for your presentation. Very much appreciated. On behalf of the committee, we thank you for coming. And also, too, do you ever see Dave Malcolm?
I haven't seen him recently, but I hear he's getting in lots of golf and lots of skiing. So, he retired in January 1st of 2019.
When you see him, tell him I said hello, will you please?
I will. Yeah, I will. And don't be strangers. It's been 12 years, but you're welcome to have me back in shorter intervals. I'm only down the road.
Okay, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, or you're not obligated to.
I'm having a municipal week. This isn't the only municipal, and I'm glad you pulled me to the front, because I believe I have one on Monday night where I'm last. So,
Okay, well, thanks again.
thank you.
Okay. We have no minor variances, Cindy? Well, there she is. Hey, Amy. Severance application. This is one that we deferred from our last meeting. Go ahead, Amy, you're on.
Hey. Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee and members of the public. Tonight, we are here to hear consent applications 003, 004, 005, and 006. And all of them are part of one application that we're looking at on county.
Just a minute, you missed one.
We did have to put the
deferral?
The deferral on,
Oh,
so
my
we just need
apologies.
to
Okay.
acknowledge it and pass a recommendation.
So let's start with 0022. This was an application that was brought forward last month, and then the applicant asked to defer it given they needed to look at the comments provided by the county regarding a mutual access driveway. They thought they'd be ready to come back this week, but they do need some more time. So we will likely see them in November. It'll be the same application, although I believe that they are altering their boundary of the proposed severance in order to potentially reduce the distance between that mutual shared driveway with the existing home and a potential future home to the east.
You know my thoughts on the shared driveway.
I do, sir. I know the applicant's been consulting with the county. They've gone out there and done site visits, so we will work with them for any revisions on the application and keep you posted for next month.
You had a question, Aaron?
Probably over to you, Cindy, but isn't there something in the bylaw about two consecutive deferrals? Can you do that? I think there's some time clause related to deferrals, and I just want to make sure we're being transparent in whatever the language is. I don't remember off the top
If
of
my
my head.
memory serves me correct, excuse me, there's a time frame
Yeah,
from the time you have a deferral until it can expire.
here you go, Cindy.
Can you find it, Cindy? I'm gonna go on my memory. But I think there is a time frame. But we're okay on the deferral on this one.
It's 11.8. Any application may be deferred for a maximum of 2 times, following which the application will be denied. Okay, so I'm out of date. It was 11.8, so that's fine. Just wanted to check for them.
So through you, she's speaking to a 2012 bylaw where 11.8 did state that it could only be deferred by a certain amount of time, 2 times. And I think at one point it did speak to it had to be brought back within a certain amount of time. And the bylaw was amended in 2023 to remove that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns from the committee? No? Well, I need a motion to either approve or deny. Yes, Merrill?
Are we talking about deferring that first one? We're going back and forth on this. Are we talking about deferring that very first one, which was already deferred?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And is that the motion that you want? Yeah, deferring the deferral?
Yes, the recommendation.
That we are in the right according to the 2023 revised
Second? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Okay. Now, Amy, you're on again.
Okay, I have to spit
Do we-
out all
do we
those
deal with
application
all-
numbers again. Okay, so now we are speaking to a series of consent applications involving a property on County Road 4, and it is concession 003, 004, 005, and 006. And it is a proposal to sever and create 4 separate conveyable lots to be developed in the future with residential uses. And the lands are currently vacant right now. The portions of the land that are proposed to be severed into those 4 parcels are located within the designated hamlet area of Camden East. So they're designated by the township's official plan as being in the hamlet, and they're also part of the designated settlement area within the county. The portion of land that is being retained is located outside of that boundary. The 4 parcels that are proposed to be severed will have lot areas of approximately 1.76 hectares to 1.82 hectares, and the retained lot will be approximately 4.8 hectares. The applicant is proposing to build 20 residential dwellings on those 4 severed parcels, so 5 dwellings on each lot. And I think what's important to note that tonight we have before you the consent applications to sever the property. There will be a separate requirement as a condition of approval that a zoning bylaw amendment occur. The lands are currently zoned as rural, and a zoning bylaw amendment would be required to facilitate what the applicant is seeking, and that's the development of those 5 units per lot. They'd have to obtain through public process, public meeting through council, a site-specific hamlet residential zone for those properties. So just to keep that in mind, tonight we're looking at the merits of the consent applications. The application would be subject to a future zoning bylaw amendment as well as site plan approval. That is also considered a condition given the number of units. I can say that the reason behind going through a consent process opposed to a draft plan of subdivision is the number of lots being 4. We thought that was reasonable, and there's no public roadways being proposed, so there's no separate parts to be conveyed to the township. So that's why we're proceeding through this process. This application did come forth, or was meant to come forth in April of this year, and it was deferred. It was going to come through delegated authority by our previous planner, but the Quinte Conservation Authority wanted some additional karst information to be done, some additional analysis. That analysis was completed. Quinte Conservation Authority is satisfied, and there are some conditions tied to the conditional approval in terms of setbacks from any karst and the process to ensure that. The severed parcels, just as a bit of background, there is the site concept plan. And again, this is a development concept plan that would go forth through a rezoning application. Really, at this point, we're really just looking at the 4 severed parcels and the retained parcel. But what the applicant is proposing is shown on the screen there. And with those dwellings and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, it's intended that each parcel will have shared water and septic services, and a stormwater management pond will be located on lot 1. The applicant has worked with the county. We got comments from the county because it is on a county road, and obviously the county will not allow individual driveways. So the county has agreed to have a mutual shared entrance off of County Road 4, and it's a loop that will provide access to all of those new 20 units on the proposed severed lots. And there is an existing driveway on the proposed retained lot, and it will retain that driveway access. There's some conditions tied to the proposed approval from Stone Mills Fire Department in terms of locating the development pond with the dry hydrant, ensuring that's available through an accessible roadway, and that's the lane. And there's also requirements that the private lane must be named and have a civic address for ease of access and safety. A lot of policy in this report, and it's different than many of the other applications because This is one of the first that I've dealt with. It's actually in a hamlet area. So the provincial policy statement, the county official plan, and your own township official plan does have a lot of policies promoting future growth and intensification within designated hamlet areas or settlement areas, and also promoting a mix of unit types, densities, ownership, and tenure. So that is something that we definitely looked at in consideration when we were reviewing the policies, from provincial down to the local. In terms of the local official plan, as I mentioned, the proposed severed parcels are within a designated hamlet area. There is a bedrock resource overlay. We got comments from the Ministry of Mines and no concerns there. And the proposed retained lot is located outside of that hamlet area, and it's designated rural. Within hamlets, there's provisions that do not, through the zoning bylaw, do not limit the number of severances. There's policies that speak to the provision for a variety of types of residential and non-residential uses, but your official plan is very cognizant of the sensitivities we heard through Mr. Pike's presentation tonight on groundwater, wells, sewer, sanitary. So there are provisions within the conditional assessment or conditional approval that match your policies that will require a hydrogeo study be done, that adequate testing for septic and for well be done, water quality testing. All those things will be part of the final ultimate approval of both the consent application and obviously a future zoning bylaw amendment and site plan approval application. Given the location, even though it is within a hamlet area, there are a number of barns located within proximity, so the applicant had an MDS study done, and it showed to have sufficient distance from any livestock facilities. We also do have confirmation that no additional severances have been done, and that would really sort of impact the retained parcel. The current zoning is rural, and as I mentioned, the severed sites will need to be rezoned, if not, even with the severance, if the current rural zoning was to stay, you're only allowed to have one dwelling or one plus an additional per unit. And while the lot sizes meet the rural size area requirement of being over 1 hectare, the frontage does not meet the current RU zoning. That's sort of besides the point because it is going to be rezoned through that future rezoning application should council approve it. 19 property owners were circulated, and we did get one written comment of concern in their comments, and I would like to note that they did note that they're strongly opposed to the applications. They live directly to the north, and they're concerned with the higher density housing will be uphill and upstream from their house and their property. They're concerned about extreme demands on the aquifer and the water supplies to their own home, and they're concerned that there'll be increased risks of leaks from the large number of new septic beds. And I think I want to circle back to the conditions of approval, which match your policies of the official plan, that prior to the issuance of a certificate of official for the severances and prior to issuing any building permits, the applicant is going to need to undertake all of those various servicing tests and analysis to ensure that the parcels can be adequately serviced and meet the township's policies pertaining to water source protection, and that this includes the requirement for a hydrogeological assessment study. So we recognize the concerns, and they have been recognized throughout your policies in the official plan, and it is part of the ultimate approval process. So in my professional planning opinion, I believe that it meets the general intent of the Planning Act, the PPS, the township, and the county official plan, and once rezoned, it will comply with the proposed hamlet zoning of the severed lots. And my professional planning opinion is that the consent applications for the severances should be approved subject to the recommended conditions of approval, which include a future zoning bylaw amendment application and site plan approval.
Thank you, Amy. Questions or concerns from committee? Yes, Bob?
I'm going to have to take off my glasses to try and get to the bifocal. I do have the applicant here through you, Mr. Chair. May I turn around and ask the applicant if he can answer that question offhand?
Sure.
Mr. Nyberg?
We don't have any specific plans, but they're proposed to be
Through you, Mr.
Okay, Bob? Anyone else? Yes, Dieter?
Question, Amy. Like, okay, we're building 20 residential structures. Why do we need 4 severances? Why not one that encompasses that entire area with all of it? Why do we need 4 severances? Like, seemed to me that could all be done in just
I'm just
one severance and then the retained parcel, kind of thing. So I'm just wondering why we're going for 4 severances.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might refer back to the applicant on that because there's some history before I came on board. I would think part of it is the access to and phasing, access to the county road instead of doing one log deep road. Some of the policies of your official plan do promote this form of development opposed to linear or deep lot. But through you, Mr. Chair, if I may ask the applicant if there was a preference when he originally came in for the pre-consultation?
Sure, go ahead.
Couple things. One, financing. It's a lot easier to finance one property with 5 houses on it than it is to do 5 and then refinance it with another 5 and then refinance. So that's kind of the biggest one. Secondly, it's just difficult to get a zoning for 20 units all on one property like that. It's just kind of a simpler way to do it, really, what it comes down to.
Okay, I was curious.
Okay,
Yeah, and the other thing is, I'm going to direct this right to you, Emil. I'm very, very disappointed that you didn't get Tom to do a proper severance sketch. Because this sketch here shows only frontages on the road. It doesn't, other than, it's in the application, the depth and all that stuff, but I would have preferred a nice sketch.
That you could blame Quinty for. We had to deal with the karst on the other end of it, so then we had to defer to Martinburg to steal or start dealing with all that stuff. So then that's where that came from. But he'll be doing the survey.
No doubt about that. Anyway, just a complaint. Oh, Amy, one more thing. The lot 1 with only 14.96 meters of frontage. Is there not minimum frontages even in hamlet developments, minimum area, minimum frontages? So this definitely wouldn't comply, would it?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, you're correct. So that's why it will be a site-specific hamlet
Zoning.
zone.
Okay.
Recognizing the configuration of the property just doesn't allow for it. And in part, as I understand, it's to ensure that we can get that ring road to reduce the number of frontages onto the county
Okay,
road.
good. Thank you.
anyone else have any concerns or questions? Yes, ma'am?
I have property up in the corner left.
Want to come up to the table?
Up to there, sir.
Don't run away, Amy.
I want to ask about the stormwater pond and how big it is and where, if it's dug, where are they putting all the stuff they dig out? Are they going to back it out of the back of the property or are they going to haul it away?
I don't have the answer for that. Emil, go ahead. Would you come up, Emil, please?
So that was more or less just a conceptual one. There's nothing cut in stone saying that that's where the stormwater is going to go at all. It's just he had to kind of put it somewhere on there.
Yeah, but that somewhere is the end of my property.
I fully understand that. We won't be trying to make anything weird happening on yours.
So I won't have a mountain of crap to look at.
No.
Promise?
I can promise you that. If you look at any other developments we do, we very much pride ourselves to make sure things are done properly, that the neighbors are happy with the end result. We're certainly not, we live here too. My dad lives a stone's throw from there. I live just south in Napanee. We have several other developments. I can't speak to why Mr. Berger put that one there. It's just where he decided to put it on the map, and whatever happens, it will be done professionally, and you will be happy with
Well,
it.
you could always move it into the land that you're keeping
100%.
and not severing off.
Yeah, it
You could
depends
keep
on
it.
the topography and how everything flows for sure, but absolutely.
And is this,
As part of the zoning application, a comprehensive zoning bylaw amendment application will include a stormwater management plan.
Yeah,
And a
which will be a
so
public
it won't
process as well.
interfere with neighboring?
There'll be a full report that will have to demonstrate
Okay.
that that's the
Yeah.
case. And those documents typically are publicly available, and that's, will be part of the application that we consider in the future. Through a public process, a public meeting, and you'll be notified of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I've
site-
left my email address because I don't live in this area
So
yet.
the site plan, it generally speaking, is a public process as well, so then you'll have an opportunity to.
And are you fenced?
Currently, no.
You plan to put in fencing so all these people won't ride their
So the intent,
all-terrain vehicles on other people's property, et
Well,
cetera?
the intent is, it's gonna be a seniors development. We wanna do seniors apartments rather. We're not looking to have anybody on any ATVs of any sort on the property. Maybe golf carts, but that'd be about it.
Well, seniors could have grandchildren.
100%,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. But
And
the-
I was saying to one lady here that we came to the property and found someone wandering on our property, questioning why we were trespassing
I've had
on
that
our
on my
own
own property.
property, so, yeah, so you never know, right? Okay, well, that's all the concerns I have.
For sure.
Thank you.
You had a question, Aaron? You had your hand up?
My comment was basically captured in the conversation, but I was just going to reiterate that through that future zoning application process, some of the details that are, outlined here at a high level will be advanced. So through that opportunity to comment, there'll be more concrete items to discuss that'll help help you to better understand what's proposed and to ask those meaningful questions through that process. So.
Yes, Marlon?
Could I just ask you to summarize what you said while you were sitting back there?
Sure. As part of the next step, it is a condition of approval that the proposed separate parcels will be rezoned to a site-specific hamlet residential zone. And as part of a complete zoning application, typically there's a number of studies that are required, such as a planning justification study, and that's something important to note, so there'll be a lot more detail. Another one would be a stormwater management plan, and usually a stormwater management report. Those reports are all submitted with the application to the municipality and generally can be made publicly available for review. And those will be part of the consideration when they're brought forth to council and as part of a public meeting that will be posted. Neighbors will be notified of it. Yes.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay. Yes, sir? Go up to the to a microphone.
Microphone this time. Okay, it's more just about the process. So I understand tonight is about dividing the lots, basically. And then there's a rezoning, and then there's a site plan and everything else. In order to do the severance, we have a basic idea of a plan for, some building, some, what sounds like tiny houses, but it doesn't really mean anything, right? We're severing it and knowing that there might be something. Is that the reality? Or what's the process? What's the next steps? Do we get to have a say on what's actually being built and how, etc.? Yeah.
Cindy?
So through you, that's what Amy was just explaining. So this will be, this proposed approval is just for the severances. And attached to these will be conditions, which will include a requirement for a zoning amendment, which would speak to stormwater management, a site plan of what's being proposed to go on the property. And they'll
So
be
I'm
much
just
more detailed,
wondering-
and it's all public.
I'm just wondering in the back of my mind why we have a plan of 20 houses at this stage, because we're not there yet, right? we're just discussing something will be built. We don't know what's going to be built.
I would defer to Mr.
Yeah.
Nyberg, but I presume it's for
And I
transparency.
just heard it was for houses of 1,000 square foot, which,
So we did this because So we did this proposal this way because we don't want to come back, you know, in 2 or 3 months when we meet the council and say, oh, by the way, now we're planning on doing 20 houses. We want to be upfront and say, this is what we're planning to do. Now, 100% you have the right to come to the council for the rezoning, for all those wonderful things. The one thing I didn't want to interrupt when you were asking John Pike about having your well monitored, if you make sure Cindy has your information, then when we do those things, 100% you'll be included. Our hydrogeologist will contact you to make sure you're part of the study and everything.
yeah.
We
My
just have to be
concern is, like, I would encourage development in the hamlet, basically, but my concern is it should be the right development. And, you know, that's
Yep, and
That's why I
100%
would
you have that ability
end up
with
being involved.
council, no disrespect here. Council will be the ones that are handling that portion, but here's just for the severance application.
Okay,
Thanks.
Okay,
thank you.
all right. We're going to deal with each one individually. Need a motion for each one. Yes, Bob? 0003, Lot 1? Yes. So you moved
Yes.
by Bob? Do we have a seconder? Marilyn, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we're on to the next.
And the last. It is the last for tonight. Right.
Talking to me?
Oh, sorry.
So we'll require each recommendation be done separately for each one of the lots.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I was, we already did Lot 1. Okay, we're going to Lot 2. 004, Lot 2. Moved by Bob again. You have a seconder. Dieter, thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Zero, 05, Lot 3. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Aaron, seconded by Marilyn. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. 006, Lot 4. Moved by Bob, seconded by Aaron. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we're on 0024, 293 Waddell Road.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. This is an application, a proposal to sever and create one separately conveyable parcel, with the severed parcel to be utilized for recreational use with a cabin on the property, and the retained will maintain its agricultural and livestock use. The site it has frontage on Waddell Road as well as Higgins Road and County Road 41. It is just west of the hamlet of Aaronsville. It is currently designated rural area by the county official plan, and it is also designated primarily rural by the Township's official plan, although a piece on the east along the county road is part of the hamlet. That piece of hamlet designated land is far outside of the area that's being proposed to be severed. The lands that are proposed to be severed are entirely designated rural. The entirety of the site does have a partial bedrock overlay, and the township official plan doesn't identify any environmental protection or environmental sensitive areas on the property. It is currently zoned rural. So the applicant is proposing to create one separate parcel from the subject property up in that northwest corner. The proposed severed parcel is going to be approximately 27.7 hectares and will maintain approximately 512 meters of frontage on Waddell Road and approximately 507 meters of frontage on Keegan's Road. As I mentioned, it's going to be used for recreational purposes. A seasonal cabin was recently relocated from another site in Stone Mills to the property. A building permit was provided for that. It's located in a field area, approximately 240 meters south of Keegan's Road and about 412 meters east of Waddell Road. The existing building now on the property will not be serviced by water, hydro, or septic outside of a Class 1 privy. And it is intended to be used seasonally for recreational hunting and use of the land. And access is intended primarily through foot, ATV, or snowmobile. So therefore, no driveway at this point has been proposed. The proposed retained parcel is quite large. It is approximately 85 hectares in size, and it will maintain considerable frontage along Waddell Road, Keegan's Road, and the entirety of the frontage along County Road 41. It's currently developed with barns, and no new development is proposed on the property. The severance sketch, I just wanted to point out, in case anyone had read the fine print on my in my report, when we were reviewing the application, we found that the township's online ArcGIS mapping, which comes from the county and comes from MPAC, actually is incorrect. We confirmed with the surveyor and with the applicant. So the township's mapping does not show the proper southern line. This is correct. This is the survey online, or the survey that's accurate. It shows the proper southern boundary and eastern boundary. The applicant is aware that there's an issue potentially with MPAC's information, and Cindy and the township, we've also provided this information and requested an update to MPAC. So just wanted to point that out there in case anyone had looked at the two figures and saw that they didn't have exactly the same outline. In terms of the policy framework with the rural designation and with the rural use, I'm of the opinion that the proposed severance and the proposed use of the severed property for recreational cabin use and the ongoing use of the retained parcel for agricultural and livestock purposes meets the policies of the Planning Act, the county, and the local official plan. It was circulated to all the various agencies, and Quinte Conservation has indicated that it has no authority, has no objection. There are some provisions that should any karst be encountered on the site, that proper measures are taken, and that is part of the conditional approvals. Through the official plan policies, the proposed recreational use is permitted. And also there is a very specific provision for cabins, which this is considered to be opposed to a residential dwelling because it is not serviced. So it is a permitted use. Given a new use was being introduced in the severed property, a full MDS report was undertaken by the applicant that was very comprehensive and covered 8 different livestock facilities, including the one on the proposed retained parcel. And the buffer area and the setbacks shown within figure 5 in the report clearly show that the location of the cabin is outside of that distance of concern, and should in the future other development be sought for that site or different, there's a lot of land along Waddell and Keegan's that is outside of the buffer of the MDS. The surveyor confirmed to meet the policies of your official plan that no other lots have been created since 1998, and as such we're of the opinion, the planning staff is that the application meets the intent of the official plan, as well as the zoning bylaw, given that it is a permitted use under provision 3.2 with a cabin. 31 property owners were notified within proximity, and we did receive one report or one comment, which I've detailed in the report. It was received from a member of the public who has concerns pertaining to the permitted livestock capacity on the proposed retained parcel where the two barns are. If a building permit was provided for the relocation of the cabin, which it was, questions about the driveway clearance, and as I've noted at this time, there isn't going to be a formal built driveway, but a municipal number and location will be provided through the township. With the concern about the permitted livestock capacity, the township's chief building official did respond to the local resident, noting that counting livestock is no longer under a municipal jurisdiction in Ontario. This happened several years ago. Under Ontario regulation, the Nutrient Management Act from 2002, it's the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs that are responsible for approving the nutrient management strategy, which links back to the amount of animals and outputs of those animals on the property. And it is the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks that are responsible for enforcing the terms of that nutrient management strategy. And therefore, anyone in the community that has concerns or questions on the capacity of livestock with any of the barns are recommended to seek input from the Ontario Ministry of Environment, and the phone number was provided to the concerned applicant. Based on my review from a planning perspective, I believe that the proposed consent and the use of the proposed severed parcel is consistent with the general purpose and intent of the provincial planning statement, the county and the local official plan, and as well as the intent of the zoning bylaw, and would recommend approval.
Thanks, Amy. Any questions or concerns from committee? Okay. Need a mover and a seconder to approve, or motion to approve by Dieter, seconded by Bob. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Sorry, Dieter.
I had a comment, but I won't worry about it.
Deputations other than, I guess there are none. Anyone have any concerns or questions before we adjourn?
Can I just make my comment now?
Yes.
Amy mentioned the fact that there's a discrepancy between the impact and the township mapping, and which the surveyor said was wrong. And of course, I agree 100% with the surveyor. If you look at the map up there, if you look up at the north end of the property, the green line, you'll see that it jogs and then goes out to 41 Highway. If you go down to what they call the south limit of the severance, that's also a lot line. If that goes across and then jogs and then goes out to 41 Highway. Sheffield Township, the way it was surveyed, the lot lines were meant to be run in from either concession, and they never meet. There's always a jog. Some are small, some are large. So when you look at the south limit of the property, that's a straight line going across. There should have been a jog there too. And that's probably what the impact mapping showed and what the township mapping showed. However, people that settled these farms, and there's more like that further down, there's a bunch of lots which the lot lines go straight across. They don't jog. So that's the way the people settle their lines. And that's what they are, and they didn't follow the rules and regulations. But we agree with them, and not with the mathematical determination that you're supposed to do. Anyway, just a bit of survey history.
You're just being picky, Dieter. Okay, we need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Merrill. Seconded by Aaron. Thank you. Everyone have a good evening.